দর্শক স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি বায়ু দূষণ নিয়ে সময় টেলিভিশনের এক বিশেষ অনুষ্ঠানে। আমাদের সঙ্গে যুক্ত হয়েছেন মার্কিন যুক্তরাষ্ট্র থেকে আসা কয়েকজন বিশেষজ্ঞ যারা বায়ু দূষণ নিয়ে দীর্ঘদিন ধরে কাজ করছেন। আমার ডান দিকে আছেন প্রফেসর ডক্টর জেমস শাওয়ার, যিনি মার্কিন পররাষ্ট্র মন্ত্রণালয়ের বিশেষ দূত হিসেবে কাজ করছেন বিজ্ঞান বিষয়ক, এবং তার বিশেষজ্ঞের জায়গা হচ্ছে তিনি বায়ু দূষণ নিয়ে কাজ করেন। অপরদিকে আছেন ডক্টর বমগার্টনার, তিনিও একজন বায়ু দূষণ বিশেষজ্ঞ এবং তার মূল ফোকাস হচ্ছে স্বাস্থ্য বিষয় নিয়ে তিনি কাজ করেন। এবং আমার বাম পাশে আছেন ডক্টর দেফোয়া, তিনি অ্যাটমসফিয়ারিক সায়েন্স নিয়ে রিসার্চ করেন, এবং আমরা তাদের তিনজনকেই স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি আজকে আমাদের অনুষ্ঠানে। দর্শক, আপনারা জানেন যে ঢাকার বায়ু দূষণের মান প্রতি বছরই খারাপ থেকে খারাপ হতে যাচ্ছে। সোমবারও ঢাকায় যে বায়ু দূষণের মান ছিল সেটি হলো 252, এবং এটি খুবই অস্বাস্থ্যকর হিসেবে চিহ্নিত করা যায়। এবং এর পেছনে যে মূলত যেটি কারণ হিসেবে দায়ী করা হয় সেটি হলো যে PM 2.5 নামে একটি অণুকণার উপস্থিতি ঢাকার বায়ুতে খুবই বেশি, যেটি স্বাভাবিকের থেকে 35 গুণ বেশি ঢাকার বায়ুতে, এবং যার কারণে কিন্তু অস্বাস্থ্যকর বায়ু সেবন করছে ঢাকাবাসী প্রতিদিনই, এবং এর পাশাপাশি প্রতিদিনই স্বাস্থ্য ঝুঁকি বাড়ছে বাংলাদেশের রাজধানীবাসীদের। আমরা তাদের কাছ থেকে আজকে জানতে চাইব যে তারা আসলে বাংলাদেশে এসে কি দেখছেন ঢাকার বায়ুর অবস্থা, তার সেখান থেকে উত্তরণের পথগুলো কি কি, এবং এর পাশাপাশি কিভাবে ঢাকার মানুষ বায়ু দূষণ কেন্দ্রিক একটি সুস্থ এবং স্বাভাবিক জীবনযাপন করতে পারে। So I want to welcome you all, and I want to start my questions like putting it forward to all three of you that based on your expertise and research, what are the primary sources of air pollution in Bangladesh you have found out, and how do they compare to those in other developing or industrialized countries?
In general, the air pollution sources contributing to PM 2.5 in Dhaka aren't so different than other countries. A critical question for us is what is the relative contribution? And some of the most important sources that we see are transportation, vehicles driving on the roadways, power generation, that could be coal-fired power or fuel oil powered. We know that there's also contributions from dust, which could be construction dust, road dust. We also have contributions from biomass burning, heating homes, and waste burning. We also know that there's contributions from the region that transport in, so the transport pollution can come from other parts of Bangladesh, or even other countries can transport here. So these are kind of together make up the mixture of what exists in the atmosphere and the pollution here.
Okay, so do you want to add anything that what are the consequences of PM 2.5 towards the health of the common people in Dhaka?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why we're talking about air pollution is because it does have known health impacts at all ages, so from infants all the way to older age. So the reason why I think we often think about air pollution as having respiratory health impacts and affecting the lung, your breathing, but what we know about air pollution is that you breathe in air pollution, it gets into the lung, but it also gets into the bloodstream, and so it has effects on the cardiovascular system, it has impacts on the neurological system, and so we see these health impacts at all ages and in many parts of the body, so not just the lung. And that's one of the reasons I think why air pollution, it's a very well-researched environmental pollutant compared with a lot of others. We have a lot of evidence of these health effects. And so when you look at these high levels of air pollution that we see in a place like Dhaka, it's one of the reasons why there's big concern about this, is because these health impacts are so pervasive, and they affect everyone.
Do you want to add anything extra in regard to the PM 2.5, excessive amount of PM 2.5 in our air?
We know that it's harmful to our health. The solution, well, when we get later to talk about solutions, the emissions, like many other cities in the world, there's very many different sources. And so anytime somebody says there's a simple solution, then you know that you're going off track, because there's a lot of different sources, and the solutions are going to need to address all those different things.
Okay. So Dr. Shower, as a pioneer in developing tools for source apportionment of air pollution, how can these tools help policymakers in Bangladesh design effective strategies to mitigate air pollution's impact on human health and ecosystems?
Yeah, so when we mean source apportionment, what we mean is we're trying to quantitatively understand which sources are contributing to the PM 2.5. And often this is an imperfect science. We have a pretty good idea, and then we develop control strategies. But the critical part for the government and for local researchers is that as we develop control strategies, we need to continually do source apportionment to make sure that the programs that we've developed are being effective and that we are actually controlling what we need, and we need to adjust what those programs would be. So it's very common in the history of the US doing air pollution control. We have a basic idea of what the sources are, we develop controls for those, but then we continue to do source apportionment, and we redirect and redefine that, so it's basically an approach of continuous improvement, and then we can eventually drive the air pollution down and continue working on the sources that need to be. So that source apportionment is an important tool that's important not only now, but as we move forward with control strategies.
Right. So Bangladesh frequently experiences hazardous level of PM 2.5 in air. So what innovative control strategies can be taken to mitigate this problem, and you have seen globally to control these challenges or fight these challenges?
Yeah. So I would say that in general, there's two types of control strategies. There's technological solutions where we have technologies that can be put on a car or a power plant to reduce emissions. And these have really been developed in many parts of the world. And I think these are readily adapted. There's costs with them, but they're readily adapted to sources like similar sources in Bangladesh, like cars and factories and power plants. But there's also important to recognize that some of the air pollution sources are human behavior. So if people are burning trash, or people are doing things that are creating a lot of dust in the atmosphere, or other types of activities. So I think some of the innovation is on the human development side. How do we work with the public? How do we communicate with people to change their behaviors that we can actually reduce air pollution? So there's a technological part and as well a sort of human factors part of our solutions.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Fai. I want to come towards you. Your work with satellite remote sensing has revolutionized how we monitor air quality. So what does satellite data show about air quality in Bangladesh? How can Bangladesh leverage such technology to improve air pollution management, particularly in urban and industrial areas?
Mm-hmm. So what's interesting about satellites, we're mostly familiar with like communication satellites, that show TV and stuff. We're fairly familiar with weather satellites. There's a lot of weather satellites that help us have much better forecasts. But there are also about a dozen air quality satellites that are continually measuring pollution all over the world.
Right.
They just went over our heads earlier in the day over Dhaka at 1 p.m. measuring pollution. So they provide maps of pollution that are uniform for the whole world. It sees everybody the same. And so we see how pollution moves all around. But then it also shows these different hotspots and what are the things that we can focus on.
Okay, so you have experience in working in the Mexico City. So given your experience in identifying pollution sources in Mexico City, how could you approach the same in Dhaka?
Yeah, so one of the things we did for Dhaka is to look at this tropomi data of what are the big sources, and to compare that with emissions inventories, where people think the emissions are. And sometimes they're in agreement, so we know some of the big power plants are putting out a lot of emissions. Sometimes they're in disagreement. There are places where we think there's a lot of pollution, but actually there isn't any in the satellites. And then we can see from the urban area, we talked earlier about traffic being an important source, about residential areas being an important source. We're beginning to see those better and better from satellites. And so being able to use that to inform our strategies and say, these are the things we need to care about.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Baumgartner. I want to come towards you. In your studies of environmental pollutants and health, what health risks do you foresee for Bangladeshi populations exposed to prolonged poor air quality, particularly among vulnerable groups like children and the elderly?
Yeah, I mean, the anticipated health impacts that we see in all other places in the world, they're not going to be any different in the Bangladeshi population, right? And so from my perspective, I think it is really important to think about those vulnerable groups, right? So thinking about children, right? So thinking about young children, and if you look globally at air pollution exposures and their health impacts, children are among the most vulnerable, infants and children, and also the elderly and people with pre-existing conditions. And so I think from a the perspective of Bangladesh, thinking about that population as it's aging, and that's great. People are living longer, right? But it also means that those health impacts of air pollution are also going to grow. At the same time, you can't forget about young children and infants who are also a really vulnerable group. So making sure that, both from a policy standpoint, but also from an intervention standpoint, that those are two groups that are being prioritized.
So you mentioned about non-communicable diseases, right? What lessons can Bangladesh learn from other developing countries in implementing energy and environmental interventions to reduce air and noise pollution and improve public health?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So we just finished a study actually in Beijing where we were evaluating a clean energy policy. So this was a policy that was implemented to transition rural households from predominantly burning coal for space heating to an electric heat pump. Right, so we found two things in our evaluation. So the first is that the impact of the policy, we were looking at heart attacks, right, which are a major cause of death in low and middle income countries, including in Bangladesh. And we found that the policy in Beijing reduced heart attacks by 7%. And so those are thousands of cases that were avoided because of this policy. We also looked at respiratory outcomes and an outcome like blood pressure, which is a really important risk factor for disease. And we found that the policy reduced blood pressure and also reduced respiratory signs and symptoms. So that's just one example of a really effective policy that reduced air pollution. It actually provided warmer temperatures for people indoors, was more comfortable, and it had a measurable health impact. So I think that's one example, but I think if you look globally at lots of different types of energy interventions or industrial interventions, those provide the potential to reduce air pollution and have a health benefit. And this is the advantage, like the advantage for thinking about the health impacts of air pollution. So yes, air pollution causes health impacts in the short and long term. But if you reduce air pollution, you see immediate health benefits that occur from that. And as you have a sustained reduction in air pollution over time, the benefits grow. Right? So the longer that you have lower levels of air pollution, the more you reduce health risk in your population.
Thank you very much. I want to ask you, three of you, a common question that indoor air pollution remains a significant issue in rural areas due to the use of biomass fuels. So what cost-effective interventions can Bangladesh adopt to transition household to cleaner energy alternatives?
Yeah, I think that the real bottom line is we need to provide clean energy to the homes, and that clean energy either be electric, possibly natural gas, but we really want to remove the burning of solid fuels within a home, because that's what leads to the high air pollution in the household air pollution, and also contributes to the air pollution outdoors as well in different areas. I think that there's cases where if energy isn't available, we could do more to do like venting them so there's proper ventilation so the smoke is going outside, or putting in air cleaners. But I think our primary goal, and my belief is that Bangladesh has made progress. There's still work to be done, but has made significant progress of providing cleaner energy to homes to reduce the household air pollution.
So I want to know from you that climate change and air pollution are closely interlinked. So how can Bangladesh balance its development goals with strategies to reduce air pollution while also addressing climate change?
Yeah, I think what we're looking for is to look for co-benefits where you can get two birds with one stone and reduce. Climate change can be really different in terms of CO2, carbon dioxide and methane are not direct air pollutants. But we see, for example, with methane, there's actually a lot of emissions of methane from Dhaka, which is related to untreated wastewater. And so that's an example where you can, if you improve the treatment of wastewater, you would reduce your climate change impacts, but you would also improve health, the health of people. You would also improve the health of the ecosystem. So you can you can design one policy that will affect multiple things.
Right. So, Dr. Baumgartner, I want to ask you, South Asia is a rapidly urbanizing region. What insights have you gained from your current work analyzing air quality and health data across South Asia that might be relevant Bangladesh's effort to improve air quality?
So we, along with Brack University, we just did a big air monitoring campaign here in Dhaka City. So we put 70 monitors up across the city, and it was over a 6-month period that we measured levels of air quality. And I think one of the big take-home messages for us was that, like in the dry season, so around this time of year, we saw differences in average levels of air pollution that ranged from 50 micrograms per meter cubed to 150 micrograms per meter cubed, right? Everyone is affected by the same amount of air pollution that's coming in from, other regions, right? But this means that there's local sources that are contributing to the levels of PM 2.5. And so I think this is a real opportunity, right? Because that means that you can, just by addressing some of these local sources, you can have a pretty dramatic reduction in air quality in some of these communities across Dhaka City.
So New Delhi is also one of the most air polluted cities in the world. So have you found anything that there are cross-border air pollutions happening?
I'm going to defer to my colleagues on that, because that's actually what they study.
So
Yeah, I think there is definitely evidence, and Dr. Falcon mentioned a little more about that. But some of his modeling work has shown transport and from other regions. But I do want to just caution us not to be too focused on that, because I think it's a lot of chemistry, but there's an interaction between local emissions and regional transported emissions that actually together make higher pollution together. And so I think there is a certain percentage that could be regional transport, but I think that there's certainly enough local pollution that we can be controlling and focusing on, and potentially working with partnerships to reduce the regional effect.
I mean, two neighboring countries, Dhaka and India and Bangladesh, and the two capitals are like highly polluted.
Sure, well, certainly. I think the one thing to remember is we all breathe the same air. We all breathe the same atmosphere. So if you blow out, I'm going to blow out a bit of air here. 30 days from now, it will have gone all the way around the world, and it will be back here. And so that what comes around goes around. And so certainly there's a need, and there are regional cooperation organizations to work at reducing regionally that pollution. But that still means that we have to do our part. Everybody has to do their own part. From the computer modeling that I've been doing, it looks like, in Dhaka, we could control about half of our pollution. To reduce pollution, there's a lot of things that we can do right here, right now, that will improve air quality for the citizens of Dhaka. We don't need to wait for everybody to do something.
Right. Thank you very much. Dr. Shaur, I want to know that with your expertise directing a public and environmental health laboratory, how important is real-time data monitoring for air quality in developing an effective air pollution control framework for Bangladesh?
Thank you. That's a really good question, and I appreciate you asking that. I think there's two aspects. When we talk about developing control strategies like source apportionment, I'm not so sure that we need real-time analysis of that, in the sense that we really want a strategy that happens over years and controls, and that's sort of the source apportionment part. But the idea that there's some days that high air pollution and low air pollution, I think is something we do definitely want to inform the public for two reasons. One is that there is high air pollution days. They can take actions to help protect themselves from that pollution, like maybe wearing masks or being indoor where there's cleaners. But also we can also prevent activity that leads to higher pollution on those days. So for example, we know that waste burning and resuspension of dust. So we have programs in different parts of the world where we say on these air pollution action days, we ask people not to do these activities. So I think broadcasting out the awareness is important. And I think also it helps control, helps people choose their behaviors that will protect themselves and also reduce further emissions.
Right. Thank you very much. Dr. Baumgartner, I want to know from you that your research has explored the long-term impacts of air and noise pollution on chronic diseases. What does Bangladesh need to prioritize in terms of public health policies to mitigate these risks?
Yeah, I think my answer might surprise you, which is that I think emissions reduction, so reducing industrial emissions, reducing traffic-related air pollution, right? Things that we think about as being transportation policies or, urban planning policies, like those are also public health policies, right? So a first step is just reducing local emissions. That is a public health policy. Thinking about improving mass transit. That's also a public health policy. Making streets more walkable, making them easier to ride your bicycle to the office, right? Those are also public health policies. And then on the more traditional healthcare side, I talked a little bit about this earlier, but right, the people that are most at risk for experiencing health impacts of air pollution are people that already have other illnesses, right? So you want to make sure that you're doing your best. If you have hypertension, that your hypertension is treated, right? If you have diabetes, that it's diagnosed and that it's treated. Or even better, reducing the incidence of those pre-existing or other health conditions. So I think when we think about public health priorities and policies for air pollution, it's not just sort of what we think about as traditional public health or healthcare. It's a lot broader than that, and it has to be across multiple sectors.
Right. So you also mentioned that you have conducted a study with Brack University. So do you have any immediate recommendation for the government to reduce air quality pollution in Dhaka and other cities of the country? And
Yeah, I mean, so we didn't specifically look at health outcomes for that study. It was really just trying to get a sense of, across the entire city, how much variability is there in air pollution and noise. I think both for air pollution and noise, and this is not a surprise to anyone who lives in Dhaka, both air pollution and noise are high. But we did see a lot of variability across the city. Some places on the same day, it's 3 times higher in one part of the city than it is in another part of the city, or it's 3 to 4 times noisier in one part of the city than it is in another part of the city. So I guess I would say as a starting point, it's sort of trying to understand why are some of those neighborhoods doing worse, and what's important about the neighborhoods that are doing better, and trying to use that to inform what might be some very near-term policies and practices that could be implemented to improve air quality and noise.
So it is also I would like to mention that not only in Dhaka, Rajshahi and Chattogram are 2 other cities where the air pollution is really high. I want to know from Dr. Fawad that how can Dhaka's air quality challenges, particularly its high levels of PM 2.5 and NOx, be tackled, and what should be the regional approach to tackle this?
Yeah. I think one thing to remember is, we've been here before in terms of the worldwide perspective. There's a lot of cities, I'm originally from Belgium. 100 years ago, air pollution was as bad as it was, as bad as it is there, as it was here. And a lot of cities now are much, much cleaner. So I want to remind people, clean air is possible. We know what to do. It's like Jill said, it's related, the environmental issues are related to health issues. They're also related to economic issues. If we improve mass transit, that will be an economic benefit to people. And so it's not one thing at a time. We need to think holistically. So definitely improving transport, we've been talking with Dr. Shah a lot about fuel composition, about improving the vehicular fleet, cleaner engines. It's a small proportion of vehicles that cause a lot of the pollution. Can we address those to have cleaner?
Know a bit more from you that what renewable energy can, how renewable energy can play a part in reducing air quality.
Yeah, so renewable energy, just to be clear, we're talking about electrification that comes from solar or wind or other. It could also be from clean burning of biomass. Some renewable fuels like wood or could be high pollution as well. But there's a lot of opportunities to have very low emissions from renewable energy, specifically solar and wind. However, as Professor Dufoy said, these have big opportunities for us, like having vehicles that are electric. We could have electric bicycles, we could have power in our homes and that. However, it's going to take time to build that infrastructure.
Right.
And so we need to be careful that we don't say, well, we're going to wait till we have all the infrastructure in place, and that we need to start working on reducing emissions. I would say that it's really important that we burn a lot of fossil fuels in the US, but yes, we have really, really low air pollution because we put control technologies on those sources. I think it's also important to realize that it's not only renewable. Things like resuspended dust, burning of waste, having a good waste waste management program is really important so that people aren't burning garbage and burning materials in the streets is an important issue. So there's a very, very important long-term role for renewables, and if we can accelerate renewables now, that's great, but we need to make sure that for the sectors that we cannot move that very quickly, that we're also reducing what their emissions are.
Thank you very much. I have came towards my last question, and I would like to put it towards three of you. That I mean, how can public awareness campaigns play a part, and citizen engagement can play a part in reducing air quality? Air pollution in Dhaka city. I mean, who would like to say?
I'll start a little bit and just say that I think first of all, I think the public is part of is what elects the government. So people need to we need to let people understand the effect of air pollution, and if they don't like it, then they should use their voice. So that's an important part. But I think also, as I said before, some of the actions of the public are very important from an air pollution. Teaching the public not to be burning waste or burning, it could either be garbage or yard waste, and trying to minimize that is something that can make an enormous impact. Doing things that could prevent the release of dust to the atmosphere as well. I think people that are promoting the use of public transportation can make a huge impact as well. So I think the public is a driver politically and a driver in terms of actually some of the direct source emissions.
Sometimes people are unaware of the situation in Dhaka's air. Like we see from research and reports, but people are unaware of the situation that it is hazardous or it is unhealthy. So how can public awareness campaigns can play a part there?
Yeah. I think it's crucial, but I think there is. I mean, it's become so extreme in Dhaka. A lot of people realize this, and I think there are various monitors. There are air quality alerts. I would think it would be great to have public outreach events, so that people start just paying attention. Today is a little cleaner than yesterday, for example, and just that little bit of cleaner air, it can give us hope. It could say, oh, it's actually much nicer to have cleaner air. Maybe if we did things, that we could have this more often. Not everybody, I think, has to do everything, but I think it would be good if everybody did something and thought, well, what is it that I can do? Maybe maybe I like to bike, and so I bike, but maybe you don't like to bike, so maybe you buy a hybrid car. There's things for everybody, personal actions. And then to motivate, like Dr. Shah was saying, the government, to sort of encourage governmental actions. We've had some meetings this week that brought together governmental employees, officials, with the academic community, to have them work with scientists, university scientists. That, I think, can be very fruitful at the institutional level. And then to think that the last point, so personal actions, societal actions, and then our vision. What is our long-term vision? What is our hope for the future? And how does that look like? And to include clean air in that, because it is possible.
Thank you very much, three of you. Thanks for joining with us. দর্শক, এই ছিল আমাদের আজকের আয়োজন। আমাদের সঙ্গে এতক্ষণ উপস্থিত ছিলেন মার্কিন যুক্তরাষ্ট্রের 3 জন বিশেষজ্ঞ, যারা বায়ু দূষণ নিয়ে কাজ করেন, পরিবেশ নিয়ে কাজ করেন, এবং তারা সরকার এবং বাংলাদেশের যারা মানুষ আছে তাদের উদ্দেশ্যেও কিছু পরামর্শ দিয়েছেন কিভাবে ঢাকার বায়ুমান আরও ভালো করা যায়, ঢাকার বায়ু দূষণ আরও কমানো যায়। তো এই নিয়ে আজকে আমাদের এতক্ষণের আয়োজন ছিল। আপনাদের সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ আমাদের সঙ্গে থাকার জন্য। সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ জানিয়ে শেষ করছি। আমি তাজওয়ার মাহমুদ।